At the end of World War II, half the world lay in ruins. Cities across Europe were dust. Asia was exhausted, but across the Atlantic, a different kind of light burned, the endless hum of American factories. The skyline of New York shimmering like a new sun. By 1950, the United States produced nearly half of the world's industrial output. Its currency became the backbone of global trade. Its universities the workshops of new ideas. Airplanes, steel, oil, and dreams all carried a single label, Made in America. It's easy to think it was destiny, that America was simply meant to be great. But greatness is never inherited. It's constructed out of geography, policy, and grit. A country born as a fragile collection of colonies somehow learned to convert abundance into power, chaos into innovation, and freedom into productivity. How did that transformation happen? How did a frontier experiment rise to dominate the world's economy? This is the story of how America became great, not by accident, but by design. Long before the skyscrapers and assembly lines, America was a raw frontier, vast, restless, and uncertain. The late 18th century United States was less a nation than an experiment stitched together by ambition and chance. It had land, plenty of it, stretching endlessly westward, but little capital, scarce labor, and a fragile political core. Yet inside that rough shell lay a rare advantage: freedom to build. Unlike the monarchies of Europe, America's early settlers owned their land, traded their crops, and governed their towns. Property rights and a culture of self-reliance became its invisible currency. From these roots, a spirit of enterprise began to grow, modest at first, then unstoppable. By the early 1800s, rivers turned into trade routes, and wooden mills became the heartbeat of small towns. The invention of the cotton gin transformed agriculture. Canals and railroads connected markets once isolated by forests and mountains. Every new mile of track stitched the economy tighter together, turning distance into destiny. But progress came unevenly. The industrial North surged ahead with factories and wage labor, while the agrarian South clung to slavery and exports. The contradictions were brutal: prosperity on one side, bondage on the other. The Civil War would tear those contradictions apart, leaving a scar and a challenge. Could a divided country rebuild itself not just politically, but economically? The answer would define America's next century, and begin the true story of its greatness. The real transformation of America began not with a treaty or a speech, but with steel, steam, and struggle. After the Civil War, the country stood wounded yet restless. Railroads sliced through the continent, factories multiplied, and oil gushed from Pennsylvania's soil. For the first time, ambition had an engine, and it roared. Between 1865 and 1914, America industrialized at a pace no empire had ever matched. Immigrants poured in from Europe, carrying nothing but labor and hope. Cities like Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Detroit rose overnight, their skylines crowded with smokestacks. The United States was no longer a frontier, it was becoming a factory. But the true turning point arrived decades later, in the crucible of World War II. As Europe burned, America became the arsenal of democracy. Factories that once made cars now forged bombers. Women replaced men on assembly lines. Production ran 24 hours a day. And science, radar, penicillin, atomic power, rewrote the rules of war and peace. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, every rival lay in ruins. Except one. America had not only survived the war, it had reinvented itself. From an industrial power, it had become the economic core of the modern world. America's rise was not magic, it was method. Beneath every triumph lay a web of deliberate choices, institutional design, and restless innovation. The U.S. did not stumble into power, it engineered it. At the national level, the American government mastered an unusual balance: capitalism with coordination. After the Great Depression, fiscal and monetary tools became weapons of stability. The Federal Reserve controlled credit. Washington invested heavily in roads, power grids, ports, and research. The New Deal didn't just save jobs, it redefined the relationship between the state and the market. Government became both regulator and accelerator. During World War II, this machinery reached full force. Massive state spending fused with private enterprise, aircraft manufacturers, steel producers, chemical firms, and universities formed a vast industrial scientific complex. The collaboration continued even after the war, through defense contracts, NASA projects, and Cold War technology races. The line between public and private blurred, but productivity soared. At the industrial level, America built an economy of scale. The rise of Ford's assembly line turned craftsmanship into mass production. Taylorism, the scientific management of work, extracted precision and speed from labor. The automobile, steel, and oil industries became empires in themselves, binding millions of jobs to the rhythm of machines. Infrastructure amplified everything. Railroads connected cities, highways connected consumers. Electricity, telephones, and mass media shrank the continent into a single, pulsating market. When General Motors sneezed, the entire economy caught a cold. That's how deeply integrated it became. At the human level, America's genius was its openness. Immigration delivered a continuous infusion of energy and skills. The children of farmers became engineers, the children of immigrants became entrepreneurs. Public education expanded opportunity, while universities became global centers of research and innovation. The GI Bill after World War II sent millions of veterans to college, creating the most educated workforce the world had ever seen. Ideas moved as freely as people. A culture of experimentation rewarded risk-takers and tolerated failure. Patents protected innovators. Venture capital backed them. From Edison's Menlo Park to Silicon Valley's garages, the American habit was simple: try, fail, learn, repeat. This ecosystem, open markets, reliable institutions, educated citizens, and an innovation-friendly state, formed the engine of greatness. The U.S. wasn't the richest because it had the most resources. Others had more. It became the richest because it knew how to combine resources with rules. And rules with imagination. The result was compounding progress. Productivity rising year after year. Incomes climbing. New technologies diffusing across industries. Every invention became a platform for the next. Railroads led to steel. Steel led to cars. Cars to oil. Oil to geopolitics. And geopolitics to global dominance. Greatness, in America's case, was never a single leap. It was an accumulation of systems, of knowledge, of trust. By the middle of the 20th century, the American experiment had matured into an empire of production. Factories that once built weapons now poured out cars, refrigerators, and radios. The suburbs swelled with white picket fences, two-car driveways, and optimism. For the first time in human history, a middle class, broad, confident, and upwardly mobile, became the center of a nation's identity. The numbers were staggering. Between 1945 and 1973, U.S. productivity doubled. Its share of world GDP hovered near 40%. The dollar became the anchor of international trade, while American corporations, Ford, IBM, General Electric, Coca-Cola, became global ambassadors of capitalism. But the true impact wasn't just in the balance sheets. It was cultural, the birth of the American dream. A belief that hard work, skill, and courage could lift anyone, regardless of origin. Millions of families sent their first child to college, bought their first home, or opened their first small business. The dream was imperfect, but powerful enough to define an era. Meanwhile, abroad, the U.S. exported more than goods, it exported an idea. Open markets, democracy, entrepreneurship, these became the soft weapons of influence. Through the Marshall Plan, America rebuilt Europe, not just to stabilize allies, but to create customers. Every rebuilt factory in France or West Germany was, indirectly, another market for American steel and oil. By the early 1960s, the world didn't just trade with America, it revolved around it. Its economy, its culture, even its optimism became the global default. Every rise leaves a shadow, and America's was long. Behind the shining suburbs and industrial triumphs lay stories less told. Prosperity had not reached everyone. The same factories that built fortune also polluted rivers and skies. The same innovation that created opportunity deepened dependence on oil and foreign markets. At home, inequality quietly grew. Black Americans, women, and immigrants often stood outside the promise of the American dream. Jim Crow laws, redlined neighborhoods, and wage gaps preserved invisible borders in a land that claimed to erase them. While Wall Street soared, small towns withered. The machinery of growth had a human cost. Abroad, the price was power. To protect its interests, America built bases, fought proxy wars, and spent fortunes maintaining global dominance. The Cold War brought security and paranoia. The same engine that made prosperity possible now demanded constant fuel, consumption, credit, and control. Greatness had come, but it was no longer free. The American model, once a beacon, had to confront its contradictions: how to stay powerful without losing purpose, and how to grow without leaving others behind. America's story is not just one of wealth, it's one of intent. Its greatness was never guaranteed by geography or luck. It was built through a culture that valued curiosity, rewarded risk, and believed that progress was not a gift, but a duty. The nation's rise teaches a simple truth: prosperity thrives where systems trust their people, and people trust their systems. Institutions that protect innovation, education that multiplies talent, and openness that attracts ambition, these are the real engines of power. But the second truth is harder: greatness must evolve or it decays. The same forces that lifted America, capitalism, expansion, and technology, now challenge it. Inequality, automation, and global interdependence test whether the model can still serve the many, not just the few. For other nations, the lesson is not to copy America's form, but to capture its rhythm, the courage to reinvent before decline begins. Because America's greatness was never about perfection. It was about motion, the relentless conviction that tomorrow can be built better than today.
All right, men, move those Gritman sacks down to the loading dock immediately. We've got quotas to meet.